Welcome to Mapping the Self. I'm Selena Garofino. Know thyself was carved into stone at the entrance of Apollo's temple at Delphi in ancient Greece. Scholars, poets, philosophers have debated the big questions around what it is to know yourself for thousands of years. I invite you to join me for conversations with artists, creators, scholars, spiritual teachers, writers, and humans of all walks of life to discuss these big questions together, to engage in a dialogue around what it is to live fully, to map ourselves, to know ourselves, to grow our compassion and listening, and to explore together our highest possibilities. Welcome. Welcome back to Mapping the Self. I am so excited today to have my very dear friend, Pete Longworth, on the show. Welcome, Pete. Pete is an incredible photographer. He's the photographer that made me feel safe getting my photo taken and inspired me to start taking photos. He's a content creator. He's a storyteller of the highest order. I don't know if he would label himself that, but he's just such a brilliant storyteller through images and video. And his actual just verbal storytelling is unparalleled. And he has incredible content creation courses that we'll talk to you about later today. But welcome, Pete. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Selena. What a treat.
I know. It's so good to see you. I've been asking people that I know because I like there to be a little personal element in this. And in particular with you, I was like, I'm going to ask him how we met, because how we met had such a profound impact on my life. And I think it speaks to one of your core gifts and one of your offerings in the world in a really profound way, and will help introduce you. So Pete, how did we meet?
It was on a beach
I
in
don't
Costa
know if I
Rica.
remember. Beach in Costa Rica.
Beach in Costa Rica on a retreat with Elena Brower. And I was doing photography sessions on that retreat. And on one of the first days of the retreat, it was your birthday. And that retreat was a very powerful experience for you for personal reasons. And there was a moment where James, Elena's partner, and I were down at the beach for sunset, as we do. And as everyone drifted back after the sun was setting, back up to the retreat center, we offered to take some pictures for your birthday. And what unfolded was a truly incredible experience, and a birthday shoot in the sand and in the water. And those experiences, the act of being seen so deeply and so vulnerably, which is what you allowed, is always such a special experience. Really, as a photographer and as an artist, one of the things that I really strive to do is introduce people to deeper parts of themselves, allow them to see themselves differently. And I think there is something very profound that happens when someone feels very seen. And I think for a lot of people that doesn't happen that often. And so this art of truly seeing somebody and welcoming them into deeper parts of themselves, into their essence, is really remarkable playground. But the best part is then to create art in that moment. And I know how much that retreat meant, and that birthday and those moments is still one of the most memorable photo shoots that I've had the privilege of being. And it was all just completely spontaneous. And we were learning each other and exploring and creating. And it was really beautiful. So we had this, I think it was even on the first or second night of the retreat. So it really just broke open the field for everybody, actually, because as other people on the retreat saw the pictures and saw the vulnerability and felt the truth of your experience, it really lotus flower blossomed into, it was a display of courage that rippled throughout that whole retreat. So that was how we met.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. It was dark outside. I was walking down the beach and he walked up to me and he was like, I'm going to take your picture now. And I was very uncomfortable. Do you remember how funny the first image is compared to the first one to the last?
Oh,
like there's
absolutely. We did the before and after.
I'm like walking towards him on the beach and I look like, I don't know, like a doll. I'm so rigid and scared. But between that image and the very last image, it was like I sunk into myself. And it was, for the listener, most people at this point know about the loss of my spouse and stuff. And I've written pretty extensively about that night and how that started some really profound healing. But I was a model when I was a teenager, and I had a lot of like trauma around my photograph, around photographers, especially male photographers, and that world. And that was healed as well. So I was so uncomfortable when it started. And by the end of it, I was like, oh no, I'm being totally held right now by James, by our friend Lindsay that was there, by Pete. And had I never even seen the images, it wouldn't have mattered because the experience itself was so profoundly healing. And then the images were just like another gift that I still hold really dearly. And every time I look at them, I remember something really profound about myself. And I've never had an experience like that again with anyone. And you have such a profound gift for helping people sink into themselves. Like I've watched it because Pete traveled to Nepal with me after that and photographed my retreat participants on a yoga retreat to the Himalayas. And I watched him do the same thing there and offer this gift of healing to people through image. And even one of the things I've learned from Pete too is how to look at images of yourself you don't like and fall in love. And I think that is a really profound thing. Someone asked me about it today. Actually, they said, I don't let anyone else take my photograph because I don't like the pictures that they take and I can't let go of control. And I said to her, there's a real gift in learning to sit with images of yourself that you don't like, that a photographer is telling you are beautiful.
Most people are very good at seeing the beauty in others and denying themselves of that experience. It's very common. And it's like a little William Wallace mission to help people see the beauty and enjoy the playground that is themselves.
Yeah, you have a real gift of that. If you had to tell people something about how to fall in love with themselves, and I'm totally putting you on the spot, so if you need a pause, what would you say to people about how to fall in love with themselves if they don't have you on a Costa Rican beach to help them unfold?
Be kind. Sometimes the things that we have running through our head that we say to ourselves, we wouldn't say to our worst enemy. It's a strange thing to treat ourselves worse than we treat other people. And so the inner dialogue or the inner critic holds the key. And sometimes you can start from the inside and go out. Sometimes you can start from the outside and go in, because sometimes the voices and the projections and the judgments that we have on others is merely a reflection of how we hold ourselves. And so you could start speaking more kindly to the people outside and practice that and then bring that learning in. Or you could start the process inside and then start to take that learning out. But in general, I think life is too short to disease ourselves from the inside out with negative commentary. Like, what's the point? Really, what's the point? We spend decades, I imagine most people listening to this have probably spent decades not being their own best friend. It's like we arrive alone, we leave alone. And then if I feel like we're the first person we should be nice to. And so often we put ourselves as the last. And then the funny thing is then we expect more from other people to make us feel a different way. It's like, well, I'm not going to do this for myself and I'm going to expect you to do this for me. And then actually I'm going to get upset. I'm going to resent you when you don't. I mean, it's quite ridiculous when you look at it. And so be it meditation, be it photography, be it just enjoying your food, find more pleasure and be kind and be aware of the things that you tell yourself about yourself and understand that they may not even be you. You know, like we grew up with this, most of us. And so make a choice whether you continue the cycle or whether you create a shift in the pattern, because it's possible. It's so possible.
It is. The whole first few years that I knew Pete in many gentle ways and sometimes slightly cutting gentle ways that I needed to hear, he told me to quit being so hard on myself. And every year when I would see him, because we don't see each other that often, he would be like, you've got a little more of it. You've got a little more of it. You're a little more settled in yourself. You're being a little nicer to yourself. And I think it's only been really in the last year at 40 that I realized that I was like on a deep level understood that I was allowed to fuck up and that was okay. Like my whole life I've been like, I can't make mistakes. And when I would make mistakes and berate myself for 3 years, relational mistakes or whatever, and hold myself to these impossible standards that I actually wasn't holding other people to. And I've only come to understand in the last couple of years that I get to fuck up, apologize, do it better again and again and again and again and again and again. And during that whole process of starting to integrate that teaching, like deeply inside of myself, I've definitely heard your voice in my ear more than once.
That's about the sweetest thing I could possibly hear, that in some way I am supporting the kindness of the inner voice.
Yeah, it's really special. Thank you, my friend. I have so many things I want to talk to you about. I'm like, where do I take that now? The other gift that you have that is so profound, and you already kind of touched on it about the kindness, is teaching people how to see the world. Like, I remember being in Nepal with you in Kathmandu, and it's chaos. Like, for those of you that haven't been, it's just so much utter, beautiful, messy chaos. And I would be running next to Pete through all the people and stuff, and I would be looking at things, and then he would show me the back of his camera of some image he took, and I would be like, where the fuck was that? And I would turn my head and look and be like, oh, it's there. You just have such a unique way of seeing the world and catching things. And I feel like I see better from spending time with you. And I think seeing more expansively and opening the aperture of the mind in that way is one of the things that keeps us in awe and playful and joyful and out of the things become monotonous when we quit noticing, like what we kneel upon, when we quit noticing, like the sky above, when someone's like, oh, I saw the sunset yesterday, like that kind of mundane, like monotony that we introduce into our own lives by closing down our seeing. So if you could speak a little bit about expansive seeing and staying playful, because you have such a gift for that, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. I think artists in general, the gift they really bring is they expand the aperture on the way that we see and experience the world, and whether that be poetry, whether that be through songs or visual or even meditation. Any art or act that actually expands our experience, I think, is a real gift. And I think it's very important to take in that kind of inspiration and those offerings from people. And so my first thing that I would say is, what you consume, you become. We know this from food. We eat junk, it has an impact. We get that. It also works the same in what content you consume. What are you paying? Is it constant, sugary, mindless pieces on Instagram, or are you watching things that have art and heart infused into them? Are you watching something that is going to expand your appreciations for the world, or are you just on some quick fix? Now, I like candy and ice cream with the best of them, and I do love a cheeky scroll for sure. And there's a diligence. And so exposing myself to great art and great hearts, the great hearts that make them, is how I expand my experience of the world. And it's where you put your attention, of course, that's where things go. So it's, I can say something, or you can have an experience with me 5-6 years ago, and it can stick with you, and that's when you're experiencing content that matters. That's when you're experiencing, these are like these little Easter egg gifts. And I think you can just collect them up and pay more attention, read the poetry books, Radiant Sutras, listen to amazing podcasts that will expand your awarenesses, and just be conscious about what you consume.
Yeah, that's so important. It's the Naveen Mashan, the Katona yoga creator. She always talks about the food of the body, the food of the communal, food of the heart, and then the food of the mind. Like, you don't want junk food in the communal floor, like the people you spend your time with. And then, of course, like you said, what is moving through the mind and what you're consuming in that way. And yeah, I think you're right that one of the ways that we just stay deeply nourished and expansive in our seeing is through art and literature and reading, because those things offer us a new perspective in which to take in the landscape of the world around us and other human beings. And, they've done studies that people who read stories and novels have higher thresholds of empathy than people that don't read fiction, which is pretty astounding, especially when you think about how many people don't read stories anymore and are no longer part of cultures where there's oral tradition or mythology, or kids whose parents don't read to them, and the implications of that. Pretty wild.
And perspective for me is the most powerful thing possible, actually. When you think about it, like, perspective can turn a prison into a paradise. After 2 decades in photography and having traveled and photographed everything from third world orphanages to the Obamas, I've seen a gamut of society. I've been to these Cambodian orphanages, and I see these kids have a wooden block, and they're playing, running, joyful, static. And I'll never forget, a week after that, I was in the Greek islands and I was on quite a fancy yacht. And I remember sitting there and there was French wine and cheese, and everyone on the boat was sitting there lamenting about the boat that was just across the way and how, oh, wow, I don't know. It was like they were all lusting for that. Like, you have everything and you're lusting for something else. And I've just come from a place where they have zero and they felt like they had it all. And what would feel like a prison for some people with what these kids were in was a paradise for them. And then what you would think is a paradise for these guys on the boat felt like a prison. And it's this perspective can turn frustration into forgiveness. The moment you're like, oh, you're really annoyed that person didn't arrive or something, no, why would they do this to you? And then you find out they've had some serious problem on the road, or maybe the fridge, maybe a shelf in the freezer broke, and all of a sudden, like an entire freezer full of really good quality.
It's no longer a campfire story now, is it? Pete and I were supposed to talk the other night. It was meant to be. No, it's okay. Pete and I were supposed to talk the other night. I walked out into my parents' garage at like 9:00 at night, and a shelf in the freezer had collapsed, and there was like pounds and pounds and pounds of rotting wild-caught salmon and tuna that my father had caught, and like wild game, just like all over the floor, just rotting in the summer sun in the garage. And I texted Pete that I needed to reschedule because there was rotting things everywhere.
Sorry, I know we did talk about not talking about that, but okay. I guess I broke the rules.
You're right, though. And it was a moment of perspective, because I told you I danced. Like, I took care of the mess that I needed to take care of, and I put on music and I danced wild for 45 minutes. And I had a really beautiful and intimate experience with myself. And it was exactly what I needed in the moment. And now we're here. And that's exactly the thing, is like leaning into what life is offering us in any given moment. Like, look at this beautiful block and these beautiful children, and look at this beautiful boat that I'm on, and not always looking externally for the next best thing, but that like deep contentment and satisfaction in the gifts that have been given to your unique person.
Right. For me, perspective is such a gift, and to be around people that can provide powerful perspectives. Because, I mean, you can turn grief into gratitude.
Okay, what was the first one? It was frustration into forgiveness.
Yep.
And grief into gratitude.
Hopeless to hopeful, from lost to found, from bland to grand, confusion to clarity. You can less than to a lesson.
That was a good list, Pete.
I have stacks of them. I literally there's a page in my journal where it was just like, it really hit me that perspective is the most powerful thing in the world, actually, because it really holds, and the fact that it can shift so quickly, that's what's fascinating to me. It's because you can be so in a state, in a way, in a place, in a dogmatic thought, and then one bit of perspective and it can completely change everything. I don't know anything else that can do that.
And all you have to do is ask a question to break the boundary conditions of your thinking. Like, my big question to myself all the time is like, what else could that mean? Like someone's behavior, because we always interpret it as what it would mean if we did it. So like someone's silence, like, oh, he doesn't care about me. He's being silent. Like, oh, Pete hasn't called me in 6 months. He doesn't care about me anymore. Or it's like, what else could that mean? Pete is doing creative adventures in Bali. This is made up, by the way, but Pete's doing creative adventures in Bali, and he's savoring his joy, and he's created a new company. And like, it's like, what else could it mean? What other reasons could someone have for whatever?
I picked up one of my favorite books recently, and it's one of those things I come back to time and time again, and it's the 4 Agreements. And in particular, one of those 4 agreements is don't take it personally. And that's been a real gift for me, because I found myself, in particular with my relationship, something would happen, or she would be upset or something, and I would take it personally, like I've done something. And my inability to just hear where she's at without getting defensive or kind of, got to solve this, do something, and just not take it personally, but allow someone to have their experience and not kind of then cascade their experience with my own lack. that lesson has been so right for me. And it's like, wow, what a gift. Something happens, may not be my favorite thing, just don't take it personally. Because to your point, what else could it mean? You know, it was like so much could be going on. And so, yeah, perspective and not taking it personally are two big pieces. And it gets back to almost that way beautifully where we started this is like, how do we shift that internal relationship? Like they're two pieces. Like, choose your perspective or expand it and don't take it personally.
Right. I mean, that's the Buddhists have been telling us that for a very long time, right? It's not personal.
I think they mentioned it.
The Buddha said that. I think the Buddha might have said something about not taking it. But, you know, like I said that out loud and wrote it in journals and wrote it in my essays and my writing for years, but I was still taking everything personally. Like it takes so much personal work and constant noticing of like, how have I just made this about me when it probably has nothing to do with me at all?
Right.
And what you were just talking about with your partner, like that's real listening. Yeah, the whole world revolves around us. And like that's real listening is like, I'm going to let my partner just have their experience and I'm not going to see it as my personal failure that they're upset or that their a need that's unfulfilled means I am not a fulfiller, which is what we hear when someone tells us their need is unmet often, right? Well, you're saying I'm failing instead of just hearing their heart, which is like, no, I'm just telling you my heart wants this thing.
I have saved hours of time in the last 3 weeks alone just by not shoving my shit into a place it doesn't need to be. Like hours of just like, okay. And that's all it needs, just to hear somebody and just, okay, acknowledge that. Obviously, take responsibility if there's something that needs inside of that. But also, I think you get to a point where everything you do, you mean well with. So it's like, and if you're doing your best, then okay, if that upsets somebody or doesn't land fully, you know, but we don't have to berate ourselves or make, you know, it's like, wow. It's like now it's my responsibility to make sure everybody around me is in a good state. Otherwise, that reflects poorly on me.
Yeah, no. And this is right back to what we were talking about being like, I get to fuck up and apologize and correct it and love better and then fuck up again, but fuck up in a different way and apologize again and do better. It's our mutual friend, Megan Hodges, when she used to live in Harlem, above their door, in her apartment, when you would leave, it was just in chalk over the door and it said, do the next right thing. And every time I would step out of her apartment, which I stayed with them a lot, I would just be like, do the next right thing. What is that today? Like, what's the next right thing? And I've increasingly been learning exactly what you're saying, which is like to leave the mistake in the past, take care of it if there's something that needs to be taken care of, and then just go forward with the next right thing. How can I do better next time? Instead of spending the next year thinking about how I'm worse than everybody else and internally berating myself. I don't know.
What's the point? I think sometimes you imagine getting end of life and then realizing it's like, wow, I spent 65% of my time giving myself shit. Like, think about it. We're on a huge rock that's gorgeously blue and green. And we are like spinning around some huge burning ball of gas across the universe. We have water to swim in. We have gravity to play with. We have the gift of thought. Get this, to survive, we have to make love and eat food. This is what we do to survive.
Two wonderful things.
Right? I mean, the best things we have to do to survive. And it's like you throw a seed into the earth and it grows. You know, it's like you put something in it and it grows and you don't have to do anything for it but wait and take care of it. That's it. We make things so fucking complicated. And then on top of all that, then we start like diseasing ourselves with our own thoughts. It's so ridiculous. Like, really going to get to the end of life and look in the mirror and be like, wow, this is what I did with this precious gift. The ultimate playground that we have. And what do we do with it? We scroll and we give ourselves shit. It's like, sorry, that's my impassioned rant, but.
No, I think it's so important. Everything you've been talking about is, my mythology teacher, Martin Shaw, says that we have an epidemic of the literal. And I think that summarizes so much of it. Like the imagination is gone, the storytelling is gone. I mean, it's not gone, but you know what I mean? There's a real, like the scrolling instead of reading a story. The humanities are dying in universities, but there's a problem. Like the humanities are dying. People aren't reading as much. They're scrolling. They're everything that you're saying. And that is an epidemic of the literal. Like that, where's the imaginative in that? And like you said, like this recognition that we're held on this heavenly host of this blue jeweled planet. I tell my students all the time, like, if you are ever questioning if you are held, do not forget that the only reason you can take a breath in is because of the atmospheric pressure of the planet. You do not breathe of your own volition. You are filled with air by your heavenly host. Like you're not even breathing by yourself. Like she breathes you in until she is finished with you, my teacher, Douglas Brooks says. And like to not see the mystery of that and the divine gift that you are alive and being breathed. Like if that doesn't put awe in you every single day, something's off, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, we agree. Pete and I agree. And we want you to have some mystery. And we want you to enjoy your food and your sex and the bejeweled planet.
Right? Why not?
Pete, you know where I want to take this now because it's really related. That inner critic is what keeps people from being creative and destroys their creative content and stops us in our tracks from writing. Like the other day, someone said to me, I wish I could write like you can write. And I said, I can write because I write every single day and have since I was 10 years old. And I can write because I write even when I don't want to. And because I'm not trying to create something. I was like, you are stuck because you are trying to make something wonderful while you're writing instead of just writing. And if you're already like being a perfectionist when the pen goes down, nothing of value will come out. And it's the same thing with photography. Like if you go in like, I'm going to make this a certain way, then it's not going to come out if it's coming from that critical place. So talk to us, Pete, about courting the muse.
Courting the muse.
Mm-hmm.
I feel the best art comes from receptivity. I think the same way for if somebody's teaching a yoga class and they come in with a very dogmatic way of how this needs to go, and then for some reason something has happened and the collective energy feels like it's in some other place. Like the capacity to read and be receptive to what's going on and then move with that energy. And if we are going in, as you put it really beautifully, about the perfectionist, it's already, if you've already got that tension in, there is a certain level of vibrancy that may not find its way under the pen. And I think you also nailed it very well when you say, well, I've been doing this for a long time. And you do anything a long time, you get better at it. And so I think there's a pandemic of people thinking they're not creative, which is a real shame. Like there's some binary black-white answer to whether you're creative. Like, what a load of pogwash. I'm like, okay, somebody instilled an idea in you some time ago that you're not creative, and now you're an accountant, and now you're in corporate, and now, which is absolutely fine, but don't be there thinking because you're not creative. Like, what do you think? There's a creative card that was handed out to your soul before you came down. Oh, you aren't going to be a creative. Everyone has the capacity to be creative in the same way that all of the free-flowing kumbayas have the ability to be amazing with their bookwork. They just don't really put the effort in. So it's one of those things where the more energy you put into something, the greater the rewards. And the inner critic is not someone to disband, I believe. It's someone to listen to, in the same way, but I don't have to take it personally just because the inner critic has something to say. I don't need to, okay, I hear you, thank you. I'm cool, you good? Okay, we keep moving. Like, I don't have to make it wrong either. I just don't have to give it too much time on the microphone, because that inner critic comes in handy. It keeps the spear sharp. It allows us, done with moderation, allows us the opportunity to become better versions of ourselves. And out of whack, it can be completely debilitating. I run a content course, which is all around creating content that matters. And I can tell you every single person that I get on a discovery call with, that joins the program, that joins our online platform, that partakes in any of this, I can tell you absolutely every single one of them is battling with the inner critic. And I can provide content and I can provide structure and I can provide all of these pieces. Nothing is going to solve that problem unless somebody takes that on and firstly acknowledges it, because you can create amazing art, but your inner critic can debilitate you from. I mean, I took 2 years off, didn't post a single thing on social media. I'm a photographer, and my inner critic or my judgment of the platform or whatever my grand story of woe was pointless because I had a jaded perspective, and my inner critic, perfectionist, I'm just like, wow. The amount of art that didn't make it into the world over those 2 years kind of feels yucky, you know? It's like,
you were totally missed. You were robbing all of us of all your beautiful images. I remember I was like, where the fuck is Pete?
I was like,
how dare he?
It's just this random indignant stance. And so my point is that everyone that comes to work with us is facing this on some level, and it's okay. It's okay. There is definitely a way through, past, around it. And I think the perspectives and the things we've been talking about, like, are all really valid. You know, if we're consuming ourselves fully with this, I must get here, I must do this, if I don't, I am this, it's not going to produce the most captivating work. And it's not going to open the door for what is the most captivating thing of all. And that's authenticity. You know, 2 decades in this game, and I can tell you absolutely there is no market cut through like authenticity. You don't need technical skills. You don't need to have, like, you can just be authentic and you will have success.
And people trip up because they try to manufacture that. Like, even though they're like, I need to manufacture some authenticity. Really, I've done it. I've been guilty of it. I'm like, how do I write from my authentic voice? And the minute you start asking that question and you're like sitting there trying to craft it, you've already stepped out of it. You know what I mean? Like, it's already gone. There's this woman I follow on social media. She's like a life coach, and her name is Simone Grace, I believe. She tells all her people all the time to do what she calls her garbage post challenge, which is that they have to post 100 posts in 30 days of just whatever and anything and everything that comes through. And lots of different experiences happen with that. I did it because I was curious. And what was interesting about it is you care less by like halfway through. There's less investment because you have this like 100 posts in 30 days. You're not so invested in the individual thing and it having to be some great, profound piece of art that transforms a life or whatever. And I think that's part of what catches people up with creativity too, is like I'm a terrible watercolor painter and I still paint because it's fun. Everything doesn't need to be a masterpiece, you know, and you tend to your creativity by just letting it be. It doesn't all have to end up published, you know?
Yep. It's a really good point. When people are starting out, that first video post, when you're actually recording yourself, can feel like the most daunting experience on earth. That quickly diminishes when you've done more of it, because it's like, oh, well, I've only put out 6 pieces of content like this. Therefore, it's like, oh my God, that's everything. Once it's 60 pieces of content, you realize, well, this is just part of a process. The percentage of care starts to, and then what actually gets to come through, you know, and you get to a beautiful place. You know, and I really got to witness this with Elena, having worked with her so often, is there's not a passive and an active. There's just, she's done so much of it that it's just, it is. And she takes a moment before and she tunes in and then she goes. And that's it. You know, it's not this like 7 takes plan, you know, it's really just, there's a trust in the truth and just an understanding that this is a piece and a step forward. But when you're starting out, and if there are people listening to this that are just to understand, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And you can't shortcut to confidence. You have to actually do the work.
That was a good phrase. Let's just pause there. You can't shortcut confidence. Be wary, the quick road.
All these people online selling these things, 30 days, you'll do this and da-da-da. And I'm just, it's not my experience. Or if it is, there's something missing. Because it might be, you might hit a metric, but are you hitting the truth? I talk about this a lot in my programs. It's the put truth above trends. I mean, there's no sustainability to chasing trends, and there's not loyalty that's going to get built. And so many people are in this frenetic chase for more followers. And one bit of perspective I would offer is that you don't need more followers. You just need better relationships with the ones you have.
Absolutely. I don't have like a massive mailing list, but my business manager is like shocked by how much my email is read and opened, like over 60%. And the average email rate is like 13%. Someone told me. I'd have to fact check that. But my email rate is like 64% of open and read. And so I might only have 2,000 people on my mailing list, but 64% of them actually read what I write. And that is way more important to me than having 1 million people on my mailing list that delete my email every week, you know?
Yeah, that's an impressive stat. I'm sitting about 45 and I'm super proud of that.
That's an incredibly high rate as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, and there's a different feeling to that.
Yeah, because you know you're doing exactly what your company is. You're creating content that matters to someone, and it matters enough that they're willing to take, because we all get so many emails and they're seeing your name in their inbox and going, oh, there's something valuable here. And I'm going to pause in my hundreds of emails and I'm going to read this thing. And when you're tracing trends like on Instagram or whatever, using whatever sound is popular right now, trying to keep up with that, it's 1 million of those in this bucket. And in 24 hours, 12 hours, it doesn't matter anymore. But if you're yourself and you're creating content that matters and it's authentic, then that's going to resonate with someone and live inside of them for years. And wouldn't you rather have something that you wrote or created or an image be the fire in someone's belly for a decade than have made a trend that went viral with 1 million people for 5 hours?
It's a good question for everyone to ask themselves, because what are we running at? Are we running at the metric of like, or are we after impact? Okay,
so Pete, the next thing I wanted to ask you about before we wrap up, because it's such a hot topic right now, is AI. You're a photographer. I know so many photographers and artists, mutual friends of ours, and people are kind of wigging out, and feeling like AI should be doing robotic jobs, not stealing artists' work. And there's a lot of fear and feeling like everything is already, like we talked about, so literal. And there's this diminishing, in my opinion, of detail in the world. Like you look at buildings now and the obsession with minimalism versus a Gothic church, like we're reducing things more and more, and there's so much beauty and detail. And you have been really invested in AI and learning about it and starting to utilize it. And I would love for you to offer your perspective as a photographer and an artist and a creator.
Well, I hosted a talk about a month ago. We called that Authentic Intelligence, and we were looking at the intersection between artificial intelligence and authentic content creation. And we had a host of really exquisite characters on for a panel, and we really dove into this from looking at the technological side of it, and then also from the more just the resonance side of it, from storytelling and authenticity. And if anyone would like to see that, you can go to the bottom of my webpage in petelongworth.com, and you will find that there, and you can watch that. A couple of things that came out of that were this. Okay, where to start? I've been through my existential crisis on this as a creator, for sure, witnessing what is possible with these tools. And it's not something I haven't seen before. When I started with photography, I was in film, and I was working with photographers in Australia who were at the top of the field at a moment when digital came through. And because I was young and I've been working with computers, I got to see what happened when this huge wave of digital photography rolled through the industry. And what happened was I witnessed people who were very good at what they did turn into forgotten dinosaurs because they didn't roll with the trend. And it wasn't a trend. It was a whole redoing. And I think that's something to really note. Like, AI is not a trend. This is a complete overhaul of the way life is going to look and feel. And so there is a certain level of how much do you want to resist this? Because it's happening and it's coming. And the reason it's going to continue coming is because we all like convenience. And I just, pound for pound, I don't think that there will be enough people that would choose to minimize convenience. I just do not see that happening. And so what we have is another major shift coming through, a huge paradigm shift. And I think everyone is wise to dip a toe in and to start to understand this, because this will be integrated with every aspect of life. And it will be wonderful. it will be truly wonderful. And for some people and some artists in particular, there's going to take a little bit of time for that perspective shift to land. And I think it's important that people take the time to be knowledgeable about it and to understand what's possible and to hold the fact that it's a tool and tools don't replace skills. And people with skills that are now using better tools can do more expansive things. Now, as a photographer, once upon a time, we used to have a technological advantage. Because if I wanted to take a photo over water at night, I would need a tripod, I would need to have the right camera, I would need to have a certain lens, I would need to understand which film I'm going to use, what film speed, reciprocity failure, how long am I going to do my shutter speed, where am I going to get this developed, how am I going to get this printed. That used to be a skill set that I had that was prized. Not everybody had that. Now, you can walk along with an iPhone in one button, take a photo of lights across water. So everything that I have acquired as a technological advantage evaporated. Now, what that did was it really shook up a lot of photographers because now all of a sudden, the thing that they were leveraging, which is a technological advantage, is now gone. And so what that really shook up in the industry is like, oh, it really made ideas valuable. That's what it did. And there are a lot of mediocre practitioners that were taken out of the mix. And there were a lot of great practitioners who didn't pick up on it, who were also out of the mix. Getting back to the reference point that we had of being a big rock hurtling through space, literally chasing out, in the gravitational pull of a large giant sun, like that's the world we're in. Now, inside of that, nothing is constant. And yet there's this dogmatic belief that this is how things should be. And I think that can be damaging, and it can certainly be restrictive for your experiences if you're trying to bolt and hold something, because you're trying to resist like a law of nature and gravity. Everything is moving and evolving. And as far as like, stuff's going to change for sure. Would I be encouraging people to become photographers now? I would encourage only if you enjoy art or if you have a very specific way of doing it. If you're a product photographer or you're in those kind of realms, you're going to want to evolve and figure out how you can use the skills that you have with the new tools that are available to take the next step and move forward with love, because otherwise you will turn to a dinosaur inside of this. And that for a lot of people, I understand that can be very hard and that can be difficult. Sink or swim, because this is what's going to happen. Now, for a little bit of perspective, maybe, let's look at taxi drivers. How many people are sitting around feeling sorry for taxi drivers? I'm not. I would prefer to order a car from my phone on Uber or Lyft because I can know who's coming, know what car it is. I can see their score rating. So there's already a layer of like who's coming here. I can see all the maps, everything that I've done. I can track where I went. If I lose my wallet in the car, there's a very good chance I'll get it back. It's a better service than getting into a car with a grumpy taxi driver who's clinging to the way that things should be. So I don't lose any sleep for the taxi drivers in the same way that people are not going to lose any sleep for the photographers or the artists, right? So some of it's a little tough love, and other parts of it, like, hey, like we just pivot, find the ways to move with this lovingly, because people aren't going to care, and so there's always a place for art, and it just might look a little different. Like, okay, so to me, it's compressing the rates of change. So if you struggle with change already, this is going to be something that you really want to put some love and energy and time into, because the rates of change are definitely compressing. And as far as who created it and the IP aspect of art, Jeremy Goldberg, who was on the panel discussion, brought this really beautiful frame up. He's like, well, the reality is that Michelangelo did not paint the entire Sistine Chapel. The fact is that he had assistants that helped him create, and then he came and put final touches on it. Andy Warhol wasn't creating his art. There was a whole factory full of people that would do that, but they would come and put their stamp on it. So in a way, like, that's human AI that were doing the job first. And so does that mean that's not Andy Warhol's. Does that mean that's not Michelangelo's?
Okay, except Michelangelo did paint most of the Sistine Chapel by himself. I have to
All
say,
of it?
he did actually, most of it, almost all of it. They know which panels he did and which were done by someone else, and they're very distinctive. They look very different.
Okay.
And then an artist came in later because the Pope decided that they were indecent, and as soon as he died, they painted clothes on the naked people. Fun fact. I'm very defensive about Michelangelo because he's the love of my life. So I had to stand up for him.
I love we got a finger on the nerve here.
Oh gosh, Michelangelo is my love. When I went last year to sit, I mean, I've been all over Italy staring at his work and reading about him and studying him. He was like a brilliant, brilliant man. You would actually love, there's a beautiful book about Michelangelo called The Agony and the Ecstasy that I think you would really enjoy. But when I went into the room where his death mask is and his final Pieta, I sat in there for 3.5 hours sobbing. And it felt, he had never been to Milan and it felt like he had just left the room. He was working on his last sculpture up until 6 days before he died at 83 years old. He died with a chisel in his hand and he was born with marble dust in breast milk because he was sent off to the marble fields as an infant to be wet nursed. And so they say that he was drinking marble dust from the time he was an infant. He's a remarkable man, the story of Michelangelo, and he was so tortured. Anyway, but yes, I agree with you.
I'll find a better example of that when I move forward. A little
Renaissance art history for our friends.
But it's all perspective. This idea of, okay, well, how all of a sudden painters thought photography was blasphemy, because they weren't doing it. You were just snapping a button. It was a mechanical process. So it's like, the point is these have been happening on, and AI is the next iteration of that. And it's an incredible tool. And it's an incredible tool that can enhance creativity. And again, used in certain ways, it can diminish creativity. I think right now there's a lot of fear definitely in and around it. And, rightfully so. As I started this, I had a huge existential crisis. I ran a content course, and all of a sudden I'm looking at what is possible. And like, well, okay, so much of this and in some intricate parts. Oh, why would you do this if you can do that? And I kind of had to go through this whole drone of oh my God, what's relevant inside of this? And the fact is there's lots relevant. If you are paying attention and really tuning in, the capacity to be able to leverage these tools, not to replace things. It will replace a lot of jobs, absolutely. And what I think is actually most interesting about the jobs it's going to replace is, unlike most of when shit hits the fan, it only affects a certain class or a certain socioeconomic place. This is going to do such a shakeup for, lawyers. Why? You're not going to have 20 men in wigs deliberating on ridiculous court cases for 2 years at a time. You can have one of them and some fancy AI that can go and scout through all of this stuff. And so now all of a sudden you've got some of the highest paid people on the planet whose jobs are basically becoming redundant. You've got accountants, you've got a lot of higher end people that are going to be shaken up by this. And then on one hand, you can be like, this is devastating. On the other, what are you going to do with yourself when you don't have to do this? What are we going to do? We work, I love this. We work so hard to earn money so that we can pay for food that, again, we go back, you can throw a seed into the earth and it will grow. We built this whole matrix of complexity around something that ultimately is kind of simple. And so a lot of identities are going to be really shaken up by this. I had that with COVID. I was traveling around before COVID and I was being flown from Dallas to Denmark and I was creating beautiful content for fancy people and felt very good about myself and had a wonderful identity wrapped around that. And then COVID hit and I got this wonderful opportunity to reinvent and get adaptable to a situation. And I think that AI is going to provide an amazing opportunity for people to do that. And I don't think there's a lot of value in spending time complaining about it. Go through the process of whatever you need to and then start to look for the gift.
I think you've articulated all that really well. And I needed to hear some of that, just my own inner battle around it. I've also been very resistant. I've been thinking about, there's this old myth called the handless maiden, and it came out around the 12th century when people invented mills and things that started speeding up the grain processing and things. And it's this story that still remains really critical and important for a number of reasons. But the wound that is discussed in it, according to the Jungians, is the feeling wound. Because every time we choose mechanization, there is a trade-off for the feeling self to some degree. And that is not necessarily a bad thing or a wrong thing, but you have to know what deal you're cutting and how much of the feeling self you are giving away. And you could probably tell from the name, the handless maiden, her hands were cut off. The word manos means man. It's where the word mankind comes from. We're mankind because we have hands and we create. And there's a trade-off that happens with mechanization for the feeling self. And so while I agree with you, and we've already had the feeling wound since the 12th century, and it's been increasing, and it's one of the largest cultural wounds globally. And how much deeper is that gouge going to be with this? Also, like Rene Descartes, I think, therefore I am, the other massive wound on the human consciousness, the separation of the mind from the body and the spirit. And those two wounds together are, in my opinion, responsible for why we don't throw the seed and have the awe and all of these things, you know? And so I also am still a little contentious about the danger of that feeling wound with this.
So let's kind of wiggle around inside of that, because I love the perspective dance and chance with this. Is there, and I'm just going to play devil's advocate on this. So firstly, I do acknowledge I'm not blasé about, you've watched the AI dilemma. I'm not sure if you've seen that yet, but that is definitely something worth watching. That's Tristan Harris's presentation around AI, and it really talks about all of the social implications that have happened as a result of social media, which is what we would consider curation AI, where it's curating your feed and, it's ultimately
I did see that movie.
Your attention.
Yes, yeah.
It did the social dilemma, and then they've done one now for AI where it's like a new layer of well, now what we're talking about is creation AI, and what are the ramifications of that? And make no mistake, that will be massive. And so there is definitely a part that, hey, can we click our fingers and go back and just be hey, make some different choices? And I love the sound of that, and I just don't see the reality of that, given that my experience of what I've seen in life is people will choose convenience and pretty much most costs. And so it's definitely an amplification around that. My question, or my curiosity then, is, do we get to a point through this where we don't need to do as much as we used to do, and then we start to return to more connected activities, to ourselves, to planting, does that, because what happens when you don't have anything else to do, right? And is that going to be the potential echoing back towards more connected? Does the value go up in these things? Does it get a little worse before it gets better?
I think so. I think the pendulum's going to swing a little bit, probably quite far. I think the pendulum's going to swing. But then, I constantly am wishing I had ways to mechanize certain things in my life, because all I want to do is write and teach and create. And I don't have time all the time.
So here's the good news for you. And this is probably a good dovetail because of what we've got coming up in the program, is there are so many people that have a good message to share, something meaningful to say, who get caught up in all of the minutiae. To record it, to get it edited, how do I bring it forward? What's the subtitling? Where do I post? What do I post? What's the structure for this? All of this stuff gets in the way. What would life look and feel like if you could write your pieces, you could plug it into a repurposing system, and everything was laid out and helped it get forward? So all of a sudden, for every 10 hours that you would have spent before, now you spend 1. It's pretty sexy, yeah?
Yes.
So that is my current mission. And actually, we were releasing this program, and then we paused because of everything that we were learning from AI. And it's wow, it is exciting, because now all of the stuff that was really complicated to do is not. And so now is a remarkable time for people who have a meaningful message to share, who struggle with the process of creating content, which is understandable because it's a whole dance of itself. But if that's you, get excited, get an understanding of what is possible. Come join us, because this is what this whole thing is dedicated to, because it's possible. That's the fun thing. And it will blow your mind what's possible, and learning how to use these tools. And then also having a way, because it's important, you can get lost in AI. And what we do is provide a playbook at the start that really asks all the questions that you need to really understand for yourself, which, to be honest, most entrepreneurs just don't know. And so they invest all of this time and energy creating content that provides little results. And they ultimately are just getting lost in the noise, and they're getting frustrated, and confidence is starting to erode, and they're like shy to bring themselves forward, and they reluctantly, and then when they do, they don't feel confident, it doesn't feel authentic, and now their inner critic is having a field day with them. And then there's the grand art of procrastination and avoidance. And this message doesn't get heard, and then eventually it doesn't get shared. And that, for me, is where I draw the line, because meaningful messages really have the capacity to shift people's lives for the better. Like, they have the capacity to shift someone's perspective from a state of negativity to positivity, from problem to promise. And so for me, those people who have those messages, it's like, get in, learn these things, and then spend your time doing what is yours to do, that is only yours to do, and embrace the capacity that you now have to do this. Because we can talk till the cows come home about how negative this could be, but there's a huge channel in here of possibility for people that have spent a lifetime cultivating a sense of self, an essence of who they are, that can now bring it forward for the benefit for others with greater ease than ever before. And that excites me.
Yeah.
That excites me. So it's like, what happens, all of you out there listening, what happens when you activate, when you make the most of this and you actually bring yourself forward with confidence, right? It's actually really simple. You want to attract more clients and have more impact, create better content. It's that simple. It's that simple. And we're in a time and an age where we can share a message so powerfully, so easily. It's just a matter of what you choose to do with it.
Yeah, no one has to go to the printing press, right? And maybe it's everywhere.
I mean, like, imagine, like, we used to do flyers. I would have to get a designer that would do a flyer to get photos and get this designer to do this thing up. And then I'd have to go to a print press, get them done. And then I'd go hand 100 of them out because it cost too much to print too many of them. And now I'm handing them out and just hoping that people pay attention. That's how that's what used to happen. And now I can get out, I can post something that can instantaneously go to thousands, tens of thousands of people for free. I'm like, it's incredible.
It is.
It's incredible. So we want to complain, or we want to start rocking the game?
I love it. It was all a really good perspective on this. I needed to hear that too. Well, Pete, I don't want to keep you too much longer, so I would love for you to tell the people how they can work with your brilliant self and about your upcoming work. Well,
I have a newsletter that has a 45% open rate. You're welcome to jump on that.
I will put a link in the show notes to all of Pete's stuff. But
So we have that. We have an online community. So where we have a membership model with that, and you can sign in and be part of that. We call it the playground, and this is a place for soulful entrepreneurs who are maybe stuck in the process of creating content, who would like a safer space to experiment before going out to social media and to other places. And inside of that, we provide accountability, online co-working sessions, free events, education, inspiration. Everything's there, and that's a really nourishing place and a really beautiful community. You're always available to work one-on-one with me, whether that is in regard to content coaching, or if you would like to have an experience of experiencing your own essence in the same way that we did. And the hottest thing right now is that we have the program coming up very soon, and that's launching, and it's called the Create Content That Matters program. And it really just comes back down to that simplicity. If you want to create impact, if you want to attract more clients, create better content. And this is a 9-week experience that will walk you through that process. We will provide you with insights on AI. We're going to provide you with a playbook where you will walk out of this with an entire content schedule for the next 6 months, which means you will know what to post, when to post, and where, and it will be all listed out. It will be all done for you. And that is something that in itself is worth the price of admission, because just knowing the yellow brick road to follow is huge. So again, we are using everything that is at our disposal to make that process super simple so that you can do the thing that is yours to do, and that is share a meaningful message.
And I just want to say for the listener about investments like that, when you make an investment like that, I can promise you, I don't even have to have taken this course with Pete yet. It's the same thing with good coaching or anything else. I can promise you will get at least a 200-fold return. And the reason why I can promise that is because you will change in the process, And every time you change and your thinking changes, that creates a new version of yourself, which makes different choices. And the ripple of that goes on for a decade. So you will get back a 200-fold return on it because you'll be different. Like blueprints
And you won't have
aside.
to wait a decade. It'll happen within months.
Exactly. But I'm just saying it will keep going for decades because you change. It's not expensive because it's the rest of your life. It's you becoming a different person. So I just want to say that in support of your work.
Yeah. I mean, for the amount of headaches, and people will continue wasting time for little results. And so if there's frustration, if there's procrastination, if there's avoidance in the field, if there's a lack of education, if there's a lack of discipline, if you just want some accountability to make sure that you get things done, this is content and this is coaching. I'm quite renowned for giving people a good old creative spanking because once the permission is given, like, lovingly, I have no problem calling people out because there's a part of them that actually wants that. And that alone is something that people really cherish inside of this. And it's a very intimate experience and you will have very profound results out the tail end of this.
I can tell you personally that every time Pete has called me out, it was a profound shift moment in my life. And it was something that I desperately needed someone to say that no one else was willing to, or they couldn't see it. You and James both have that gift. You and James, Elena's partner. You and James,
And
the two
for
of you
anybody
together.
who would like, oh my God, that's a
I should have brought you both
made in
on.
heaven. Or that.
Next time, Pete. Next time.
There we go. I like the sound of that. And just lastly, for anybody who is just curious, you can jump on a discovery call and we can have a one-to-one touch point and I can help point you in the direction of what we have and how that will best serve your journey.
I would take that opportunity if I were you, my friends. Pete, I so appreciate you. Thank you for coming on. I just love you so much.
Back at you, Selena. This is a salubrious communion with you every time. It's so wonderful. And I just really want to reflect to you the power and the beauty that I see evolving and growing inside of you. I've been fortunate enough to see you in many moments of life and states of being and vulnerabilities and strength and courage and leadership. And it really is a privilege to witness. And so thank you so much for this invitation to come here and to really continuing to be part of that journey because you are a force and I am so grateful to be able to witness because I learn a lot from you. I learn a lot about resilience and courage and just showing the fuck up.
You're gonna make me cry. Thank you, Pete.
A lot of people fall short of that. And so I take great wisdom in your courage.
Well, Pete will be back. He hasn't agreed to that yet, but I'm just saying he'll be back. Thank you, Pete.